The Adventist Church loves to quote Isaiah 58:13. Like everything else they do when it comes down to quoting scripture, they quote it out of the context which it was written. So I'm going to put it in context. And I'm going to read it from the beginning of Isaiah 58 to verse 13. And let us see what we find. Isaiah 58 verse 1, it says, "Cry aloud and spare not, to lift up your voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgressions, and the house of Jacob their sins." Now, he's not talking to the Chinese. The Chinese aren't the house of Jacob. He's not talking to the Japanese. They're not the house of Jacob. He's not talking to South Africans. They're not the house of Jacob. He's not talking to the United States. We're not the house of Jacob. He's talking about Israelites. And the house of Jacob, they're all circumcised and commanded to keep the law of Moses. Here's what he says. "Yet they seek me daily, and to know my ways, and as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook my ordinance, not the ordinance of their God." They ask of me ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching me and approaching God. That's how they act. "Wherefore have they fasted?" They say, "See you not? We're fasting. We're keeping the Sabbath. See how holy we are?" They pretend as if they're so holy. Wherefore have we afflicted our souls, and you take no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast you find pleasure, and exact all your labors. Look, we all know that the Adventists go out to eat on the Sabbath. They cheat all kinds of stuff on the Sabbath, okay? Yeah, there's some of them who are devout for a short period of time, but then they cheat. And they get used to cheating, and they all categorize it as doing good on the Sabbath day. And then even when it comes to fasting, the scripture says, "Behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with your fist of wickedness. You shall not fast as you do this day, to make your voice heard on high." I'm not going to accept those fasts, is what Christ is saying, what God is saying. You smite with fist of wickedness. That's how you are. If you're out there calling Christians, Gentile Christians, a bunch of sun worshipers, a bunch of pagans. In verse 5, it says, "Is this such a fast that I have chosen, that for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this the fast and an acceptable day of the Lord? It is not the fast that I have chosen." Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loosen the bands of wickedness and undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke? No, they want to take all of Christianity and put it under the yoke of bondage under the law. That's what they want to do. They don't mind breaking up marriages. They don't mind breaking up father from their children and children from their fathers and from their mothers and vice versa. They have no problem doing that. All because they want to make more members so they can feel justified in Sabbath keeping, making Sabbath keeping binding upon the Gentiles. Is this what he wants? No. It is to deal bread unto the hungry, that you bring the poor that are cast down out of the houses, and that you see the naked and you cover him, and hide not yourself from your own flesh. That's what Adventists do when they bring Sabbath keeping, which was never required of the Gentiles, never commanded, never condemned, never admonished to keep the Sabbath. What they do is they separate the husband from the wife from the husband, the children from their parents, from their grandparents, from their aunts and uncles, and they hide them from their own flesh. He said, no, that's not what I want you to do. We want you to feed the poor, take care of those who are needy, that have no houses to live in. Then shall your light break forth as the morning, and thy help spring forth speedily as the righteous. Righteousness shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall reward you. Well, I can't help it. Then shall the light break forth as the morning. Wow. Reminds me of Sunday morning when Christ's light went forth, and with the Son of Righteousness, with healing in his wings, and thy help shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you, which is Christ. And the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then you shall call on the Lord, and he shall answer. You shall cry, and he shall say, here I am. If you take away from the midst of you the yoke, the putting forth of the finger. Stop calling Christians sun worshipers. Stop talking about how evil they are and speaking vanity. That's verse 9. And if you draw out thy soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted, then thy light shall arise in obscurity, and the darkness shall be as the noonday. What a picture. Notice how the prophet Isaiah is no pagophobiac. He's not afraid to make a parallel of the sun rising in the midst, and the morning sun rising, and the light shining as the noonday. He's not a pagophobiac. He's not afraid of paganism. The scripture constantly uses the sun as a sign of God's righteousness and brightness and light. And the Lord shall guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought, and make fat thy bones. You shall be like a water garden and a spring of water, whose waters don't fail. And they that shall be of you shall build all the old wasted places, and shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and they shall be called the repair of the breach, not a separator of families, and holier than thou, the restorer of paths to dwell in. And now we go to verse 13. If you turn thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasures on the holy day, and call the holy day a delight, holy of the Lord, honorable, then, and shalt honor him in not doing thy own ways, nor finding thy own pleasures and speaking your own words. In other words, be circumspect. Be circumspect. Do you know that of all the things the Pharisees did, they never condemned anybody who was uncircumcised for not keeping the Sabbath day? They were as self-righteous as you'll find. They murdered Christ, but they still didn't call Christians, or the God-fearers as they were called, sun worshipers. And think of the evil things and say the evil things that the Adventists do. Now I want you to see verse 14. Then you shall delight in the Lord yourself, and I will cause you to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. Is he talking to the Chinese? Is he talking to the Japanese? Is he talking to Americans, the British Empire? Obviously not. He's talking to the circumcised Jewish people and the strangers in their gates who were also circumcised, who kept not just the Sabbath day, but all the annual Sabbaths, all the Sabbaths of Leviticus 23, who kept tithes, who 3 tithes some years, who kept the animal sacrifices, who did all the things that Jewish people did. The new moons, the Sabbath, the holy days, all of it. That's who he's talking to. As always, the Adventists, they take one verse, take it totally out of context, and apply it as if all mankind were obligated to keep the Sabbath. They don't look at Isaiah 58, verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not to lift your voice, and show the house of Jacob their sins. It wasn't talking to Christianity. It wasn't talking to anybody than the Jewish people. If you want to keep the Sabbath, that's fine. You can do it. But if you preach that others are obligated to teach the Sabbath, when Isaiah or the prophets and Moses and now the prophets and Christ and the apostles never taught the Gentiles were obligated to keep the Sabbath, then you are a breaker of the law of God itself, because it was never intended for anybody except the circumcised Jewish people